Hi, everybody. It's Ed from the Krista and Ed Show, obviously Krista. We're here today and we're super excited. We've got Kevin Willis, who we met actually in Boise, Idaho a couple months ago. Kevin Willis hails from Falls Church, Virginia. He has a PhD. He's a sports psychology consultant. He does peak performance coaching. He has a level 5 USA hockey coach accreditation. His nickname is Dr. Dub, and really he helps athletes, not necessarily with the psychology, about the physical side, but more from the psychology side and helping extend further and all about mindset. And I'm going in waters I don't know, so I won't go too far. But we really appreciate you spending some time with us, Kevin. And we would love to hear about what you're passionate about and what you're doing.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be on the show. I know that that it may not make sense. Why would you have a sports guy doing an entrepreneurial show? But I guess at the end of the day, when you talk about peak performance, when you're talking about trying to get the most out of your potential, it is a lot about mindset. It's about belief. It's about hard work. It's about being able to bounce back from adversity and obstacles. And so all of that it sort of goes across all the realms, whether it's sports, like hockey. I specifically coach hockey, or it's football, or it's baseball, or it's the entrepreneur who's maybe sitting in their office at home. Maybe they're by themselves and they're just not feeling that passion, or maybe they're feeling doubt or anxiety, and the ability to sort of dig deep and work through it and move forward anyways is the mark of a champion. And you guys got where you were because you continue to move forward even when obstacles step up, and even when adversity steps up, and even when the big D word, doubt, right? Doubt is a killer. And so you just keep moving forward, and that's so powerful, regardless of what you're doing. And for kids, I work with a lot of young people. That's a lesson that you just can't learn early enough in your life. As an adult, I meet far too many people that don't have the ability to work through those issues because they've never been taught. They've never, had somebody sort of coach them. And so I'm passionate about, making sure that kids from the sports perspective, because that's what they really resonate with, get it. And then when they can translate those skills into the real world, then it's just a win-win.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. I myself, honestly, as much as I always wanted to be on a sports team, I just wasn't coordinated. I'm not going to lie. I tried out for a few, but mindset is huge. You're right. And also, I'm just kind of tying it back as you were talking in the entrepreneur world, being part of a team, to win together is not a one-person sport, right? So in business, it's kind of the same thing.
Sure.
Try and do it all yourself, but it's going to work a lot better for you if everybody's working together towards that, common goal. So
I guess the Edmonton Oilers would be a great example. We've got all these number 1 draft picks, and
are you going?
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's the elephant in the room. We got this superstar team, all these A players, and trying to have the psychology of them all getting along and creating that chemistry, because you can have the worst team really just create in whatever sport.
Yeah.
And it just becomes a superstar group, right? So
yeah.
My only Oilers reference, sorry.
I'm a big fan. I like anything hockey, so you can't bore me, sure.
Yeah.
So when you say that you work with kids, are you talking about when they're part of a team as you're coaching them, or is there something separate that you're doing?
No. So I work with players as young as, say, 10 or 11, because that's an age where they're sort of still in mom and dad's pocket and still learning the game and still sort of being, driven and pushed into playing. They like it for sure, but it probably wasn't their decision. And yet, they're still, so you get them at that point, but then, around 13, 14, certainly 15, 16, now this is starting to become their passion, and they're starting to drive the bus, and they're starting to have to take on the accountability and the responsibility of sort of taking charge of where are we going to go with this thing. And if you don't have things like goals, and if you don't sort of know who you are as a person, as a player, then you're going to struggle. You're going to bounce off of things. And so what I try to do is to sort of corral them early enough to where they understand there's some key milestones that you probably should understand, because as we work through all of this coaching and these ideas, they're going to come in handy. They're going to help you sort of navigate this stuff. I tell kids all the time, and it's not just hockey, it's all sports, but specifically in hockey, it's a very rough journey to get from being the wannabe to being the superstar, right? It's a hard journey. And if you're not willing to accept that you're going to have to endure some very uncomfortable times along the way, then you'll bail. There's a statistic that's very sad that 70% of all the young players that get into sports, when they're 5 and 6 and 7 years old, when they're getting into sports, by the time they're 13, 70% of those players are out of the sport. They're done. I'm done, right? Think about that. That's still such a young age, right? 70%. And 90% of the reasons are mentally motivated. Their coach is a hard ass. Their parents are pushing them too hard. My teammates don't like me. All of these type of mental stresses are what push them out of sport. Not the sport. They love the sport, but they just can't handle the pressure. So if I can change that number even by 1 or 2% over my lifetime, I think that would be just, that would be a calling for me. So my goal is to make sure that these mental skills, this mental game training is a requirement. And it's not now in any sport, but I think it should be. I think it's as important as all the other things that they learn. And so my goal is to spread that message, make sure people understand that you need to teach these skills as well as the physical skills for kids to be successful and to enjoy the journey, right? Even though it's hard, to enjoy the journey.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, yeah, wow. That's amazing. I just think back, my daughter's fairly young, but there were some girls at the lake who were in cheerleading, right? They're quite a few years older and they're doing flips and flops all over the place. Yeah. So she's 4 and she's like, yeah, I want to be a cheerleader. So I'm like, okay, right? Mm-hmm. So we put her in cheerleading, and it's an expensive sport, and buy her all this stuff. And, we made her finish for a year, but after probably day 3, she's like, my legs hurt, my teachers make me hurt. But, it's hard though as a parent too, though, because I remember at that point going, okay, am I pushing her into something that all of a sudden I wanted to do, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think our decision was okay. She was 4, and, she's getting older, and if she wanted to go back into it, we could. But, just the psychology of that is really cool. I would be honored to have a coach, teaching my kids that kind of stuff, because not all parents have that skill set themselves.
Yeah, no, you're spot on. And I think the idea that, a young person exploring different sport opportunities, who knows what they're going to like, right? And kids in general, they may love it, but they may hate it today, right? So that doesn't mean they hate it. They just means today but see, isn't that true of even us as entrepreneurs trying to build a business? We love it, but we hate it. Today is a terrible day and I hate it. Why did I get out of bed? And, maybe I got to have a meeting, or maybe I got to go somewhere and I just don't have it. So what happens when you have to bring it anyways? What happens when you have to perform in a stressful situation anyways? And so if you don't have the skills, and if you don't have the motivation to try to work through that, then that will be a major fail. And as a business person, you don't want to fail. You got a customer in front of you and you're not feeling it. You can't afford to just bail. You can't just say, no, sorry. Hey, Mr. Customer, I'm just not feeling it today. So we'll reschedule. See you later. That just doesn't work. And a kid, they get to do that and they get to explore. But, it's funny because the hard journey I talked about for hockey, or any sport for that matter, geez, do you think that every entrepreneur ever really steps back for a minute and says, listen, I know this is going to be brutal. This is going to knock me down 150 times. Am I committed to getting up every single time and continue to move forward? And most won't explore that early. And then you only find out who will by who did, right? who did. And so there's a reason why there's a lot of failures in business, is because maybe they didn't take a couple of steps back and say, all right, what am I getting myself into? Anybody can perform when things are good, right? Yeah. Anybody can be their best when things are good. But who are the performers when things are hard? Who are the performers when the pressure is really high? Yeah. And, statistically, they say that you don't perform better under pressure. Some people say, oh no, they're a gamer. When the pressure's on, they really bring out their best stuff. That's not backed by the research, right? So that's sort of a myth. And then that's okay, because that might get people through a tough situation. But what does happen is those that can at least maintain their performance, continue to perform, they appear to have raised their performance because so many have fallen off, right? Uh-huh. So the gap is sort of a false gap. But at the end of the day, if you can continue to push, even when you're under pressure or you're just not feeling it, you're destined to be a winner.
Yeah. I love that. It made me think of this visual. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's probably gone around on Facebook, and it's a cartoon, and there's somebody like chipping away at the rock, right? And they're this close to the end, and it's saying like don't stop. You don't know how close you are. It's because so many people stop right before the end.
Yep. Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And the other way. So
I think there's lots of layers to that too. Like some people have self-destructive personalities, right? They get to that spot where they've done it all, and then they're like,
no, it's something they've done it all,
or they've not done it all, but they've reached a certain point, and they don't feel that they deserve it.
Yeah,
I mean that's a layer.
But
right?
That's incredible. As a matter of fact, you hear about fear of failure. That the idea that I'm going to try this, I'm going all in, and oh my gosh, if this thing doesn't work out, I'm going to be humiliated, and it's just going to be the worst case scenario for everybody, my family, myself, and it's just, I can't handle it. I shouldn't go for it, right? So we pull back. Well, that's one thing, but the fear of success is real. Just like we were talking about, Ed, the idea that what if I do make it? What if I am hugely successful? Oh man, and then they're freaking out, and so then they pull back, and then they sort of sabotage their own efforts, and they don't show up, and they don't give everything, or they just bail. You see it all the time. It's an amazing thing. And so the idea of things as simple as gratitude, being grateful for all the opportunities that you've had, it grounds you. Optimism. They say that if you're too optimistic, you might think things are better than that they are, and that people that have a tendency to be sort of on the negative side or more realistic in life. And that might be true too, but let's just face it. Who would you rather be around? Somebody that's positive or somebody that's negative, right? And if we look at that positive and negative as energy that we could see around people, right? What happens when you got a negative person and a positive person?
Yeah.
When you go to that positive person, you can just feel that energy, and it's coming to you, right? When you're around the negative person, which way is the energy going? Oh my God, they're like a vampire. They're sucking all the energy right at it, and you're exhausted after being around this person. You're like, oh my gosh, I don't think I can hang out with this person anymore. So, these are, does the science, back up this idea that negative energy will draw people in? No, but there's enough anecdotal evidence, and come on, when you're around negative people, they can just ruin everything. That's part of it. That's part of it. And I think honestly, the idea that if you can get your head around where you're going, you got to know what you want. You got to be willing to take the slings and arrows, and you got to be willing to push through anyways. Those are skills. Those are skills that you can learn. You don't have to just experience and say, oh my God, that was brutal. I'll get back up and try again. Oh my God, that was brutal. I'll get back up and try again. And you go through that a few times. You're like, dude, I know how to do this now. This is great. But what if I told you I could teach you some things so that when you get back up, it's easier the next time, and maybe you don't get knocked down again. Maybe you keep moving forward. It's a combination of, skills you learn and skills you experience, but why not take a chance on the things that you can learn?
Oh yeah. And this last year, I have to say, for me anyways, has been really cool, because I'm exploring all of that now and realizing that, this isn't something that people just have or don't have, right? And I think for a long time, I just thought, well, I'm just you know, I consider myself to be a pretty positive person, but there are techniques and things you can do to keep pushing yourself forward. I am so guilty of the sabotaging thing and fear of success. Like I have to tell you, in my other business, like when things are going really good, it's almost like that's when I was more nervous, because there was this thing in my head that told me I don't deserve this. There was this thing that was telling me that now all of a sudden more people are going to be judging me because they want to drag me down. Right. But you know what? It's like, that's done. Like that's broken down now. And it's so cool to have found, you know, the community that we have, and the coaching and all that kind of stuff, because it's like, what have I been doing all this time? Like I am a superstar and I'm just getting started, and everybody else can just move right out of the way. And I'm not saying that in a bad way, right? Like I'm not knocking people or putting people down. It's just that you have to be able to stay in that zone and protect it. Right?
Yeah. There's actually a term in the research. It's called the imposter syndrome, right? The idea that I'm doing something and people are recognizing me and they love me and I'm successful, and how did this happen? I'm not that good. I'm not that successful. What's going on? And so you sort of shrink down. It is. It's all a mental thing. But once you can get over that hurdle and just sort of be grateful for what's happening, and not attach too much to that stuff, right? So it's just stuff, you know, the whole idea of thinking, it's words and pictures, right? It's not real. It's words and pictures. And so you get to sort of decide what those words and pictures are going to be. And that's, you know, part of what I teach my players is that you can turn the channel. If you don't like what's on your mental TV, just turn the channel. The channel. You know,
Krista and I have talked about that before.
Yeah.
Like if we're down or something, she's like, okay, I'm gonna just like hard change it.
Well, for me, it's always been a conscious thing, right? Because I do believe, like you said, it's important to learn some of this stuff, you know, when you're younger, but not everybody is, you know, brought up in the best scenario family wise, or everybody experiences different things in their life. Right. So we're actually are wired, you know, a certain way, and our brains, I think, automatically kind of default to like fight or flight. Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
So, you know, for me, like I've always kind of had this self-talk thing in my head from as far as I can remember as a child, right? Being like, well, this isn't right, or I don't like this, and one day I'm going to do it differently, right? But I mean, I'm 39 years old now. That's a lot of years, and I'm conscious of it. To keep, you know, doing that sort of a thing. And when you're a child, you don't necessarily have control of the environment that you're in either, right? But as an adult, it's really cool, not just an adult, but mindset when you're younger too. Like it's so cool to realize that, oh my God, like you can change this whole story at any time.
Yeah.
It's like that.
Anytime.
It's like that keynote speech that Steve Jobs did, where he basically said, the day I changed my mind was when I realized everything around me was contrived by other people, like how your house looks, the size, you're in a box, whatever it may be, was defined by other people that maybe were not as smart as him or whatever. It didn't matter. It was just like, whoa, wait a minute. So the iPhone and transforming society to some degree with this technology device, you know, took somebody who like realized that everything around you is completely contrived by other people. It's not necessarily, you know, whereas most people put a container around themselves and go, okay, well, here you go. And we're all bad about that. I've done it before. You break everything down and then all of a sudden you're like immediately recreating. And Krista and I talk about that. She's like, whoa, okay, we're not recreating what's the past, we need the future. I'm bad about that because it's like, okay, I gotta, you know, and you, so it's fascinating.
He'll say things like, and this is how forward thinking I am, right? He'll say things like, oh, you know, we should get a hot tub. And I'm like, but we're not living here like forever. So why would we do that? Like we're moving to Hawaii. So like, why would you talk about a hot tub? Like, you know?
Yeah. But it's good. I mean, and to be able to do that, you know, and really think about mindset and how you don't realize how powerful it really is.
I think part of it is when you're a kid and you're young, you don't, you don't evaluate and judge as readily as you do when you get older. And we sort of grow into it, and that's sort of a protective mechanism. But we judge and we evaluate, and we have rules for all of our thoughts. We see something and we instantly have a rule for it. And so that's how it is, right? And it's not until you reach a point where you just say, wait a minute, whoa. So I'm looking at this thing, and they're saying something, they're looking at it too, and they're saying something's completely different than what I'm saying, but we're looking at the same thing. So it's about the rules and the judgment and the evaluation. So if you start to recognize that thoughts are just words and pictures, then you can sort of separate from them a little bit and just say, okay, wait a second, I'm not the thought, I am just observing this thought. The thought is here. So let me create some space and maybe look at it from a different angle. And then all of a sudden, it doesn't mean the same thing, and you get better at doing that, and that's one thing that I think where I'm going with the sports psychology piece is that, so much of my work has always been a cognitive skill, learn how to acknowledge your self-talk, right? So recognize the self-talk and then change it. So when I'm saying this about myself, say this about myself. But that's actually taking action on a thought, and that requires thought. Well, if you're an elite athlete and you're playing a fast physical sport like hockey, you don't have time to think. Your body had better react, right? Yes. So what I'm teaching them to do is to separate from these thoughts. Don't get hooked by them, all right? So my analogy I use is, imagine you go fishing, you throw your line out, right? You get a fish on the hook. What's the fish do right when it gets hooked? It fights, right? Yeah. It fights and it pulls and it pulls. And what's it do to the hook? It makes that hook tighter, and it makes the situation worse. So its instinct is to fight, to try to get away, but that actually makes the situation worse. Wow. What if it just relaxed? What if it swam to the danger? It swam at you. That hook might just fall out, and you'll separate from that issue that you had. So easy to talk about, hard to do. But when you begin to sort of recognize thoughts as just words and pictures and be able to sort of separate yourself from them, then you're really on your way to, a wonderful life, because now you're not going to be controlled by thoughts and opinions and judgments and rules, whether they're yours or those that are imposed on you. You can just sort of see the world and say, wow, you know what? I like this. I like all of this.
Oh, it's interesting. And it's not this, it's a little bit of an aside. Krista and I had a discussion the other day, because she's lived in Quebec for a couple of years in her informative years. So she's fluent in French. And so she says, sometimes when I meet somebody and we're talking, it's like your mind shifts to thinking in French, right? Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people don't understand that we think in a language. So we're defined by that language. Mm-hmm. So in some cultures, is there a word love? No. So does that mean love exists? Mm-hmm. So it's interesting how you bring this up. I'm having some thoughts here. Yeah, epiphanies about it. She's like, if you can separate yourself from it, from the real core of you and that thought, and not being defined by it, that's a really hard thing to do.
Very hard to do. Mindfulness and meditation, those are things that have been around for, thousands of years, literally thousands of years. But if the further I get into all of these, skills that you can actually do, the things that you do this, you do this, you do this, you do this, the further I get down there, the closer I realize that it's not the doing, it's the not doing, right? It's the just sort of be, right? Sort of, if you've ever done meditation or mindfulness, you feel this weird sense of calm. Well, the point of the meditation isn't to feel calm. It's not. It's to be present, right? The calm is just a happy accident. But there are a lot of other things that come out of that kind of training. And so I'm finding the whole shift from being, absolute intentional with doing and doing and doing, to slowly moving to not doing and just being, and recognizing that if this bad thing comes into my space, I don't actually have to, deal with it right here in front of my face. I can take a step back. I can expand the space, so then it's further away still. And I don't have to interact with it. I can actually not even pay attention to it. I can pay attention to my breathing, and that's hard skills to learn, but they'll change your life. They literally will change your life.
I have to tell you, if I was a fish, I'd have got caught every time.
Yeah.
Like I'm okay, I'm gonna, and she's like, whoa,
well, how do you
where are you gonna get in the car and go?
How do you think
where are you going?
Right?
There you go. Nice.
I'm like, oh, I gotta deal with it. And she's like, you're getting in the car. You're really going right now. And because I do that, I'm impulsive. It's like, there's a problem. I got to go. Yeah. So I definitely would be like, okay, I'm bad for that. So yeah, no, there was an analogy I heard from Tony Robbins many years ago where he said, he had gone to the circus and there was the elephants, right? And they're huge and really they're just walking around. It's like, hey, elephant, be free. Like open up the tent and walk away, right? And so he talks about that and he says, but if you step back and you go, okay, when that elephant was a baby and it had the rope around its leg, which most of those elephants, when they're sitting at the circus, they have a little rope and a little stake.
Yeah.
But when they were little, they pulled on that stake, pulled, because they didn't have any preconceived notion that they couldn't do it.
Right.
And they're pulling and pulling and pulling, and then they accept at some point psychologically
that they have to stay.
And now they're like 10 times the size, and that psychological barrier is there. So I was going to try to think of it, although whether you implemented it with thought is another thing, but it was something that kind of impacted me thinking of that. Like, you are molded from your younger. So it's incredible that you're mentoring kids that are young enough that you can mold them that way. And really that thought process, the people that are super elite athletes, tend to do a good portion of them can do well in business or in life in general.
It goes across the board. And I noticed that as well, like with friends of ours and their kids who are involved in sports, it's not just one area that they're good at necessarily either. Right. So. No,
absolutely. Yeah. There's no question that the people that can learn how to, perform under pressure and perform with confidence, regardless of their situation, can do it in the next phase too. In business, you're up in a tough situation in a meeting or negotiation or something, you can continue to bring it because you've got those skills. So I love what I do for sure.
Would you say there's like a theme to where people have obstacles? Like, are there patterns that you've seen? You've kind of brought up some, but I was just curious, like, because
so specific, to things like judgment. We all judge. We're looking around and we have judgments, and so those judgments stimulate the thought of the rule that goes with that judgment. And then we the judge. Your analogy of the elephant. It didn't know that when it was young that it was stuck, and then it learned that it was stuck. So it created that condition, that rule, and then later on, just by putting a rope on its leg, the rope was tied to a nail that could pull out easy, but just by putting that stimulated the rule. And so the rule is that I can't get away. And so I'll live my whole life, when you put a rope on my leg, I will stay nearby because I can't go anywhere else. And until you change that rule, you've heard the analogy of your brain is wired certain ways, right? Back, when they had record players, you remember those things with the actual needle?
Well,
and all?
I don't.
You definitely remember.
Well, back in the day, they had record players, and so they literally had grooves on them. And so if you played that song, it sounded great. But if you took a nail and you scratched it, what would happen when it came across? Well, it would skip and it wouldn't play right. And so you almost have to do that to those wirings in your brain. You have to scratch them, you have to break them down, and then you only then do you have an opportunity to learn something that's different.
It's the only way you can do it, and it's hard. It's hard to go inside yourself and rewire. And really, because some stuff has been buried for so long that you actually didn't even really know it was there. But I truly do believe that you have to go through all of that to get to a point where you really can, be your best. Your best self,
And just for the record, the only reason I know what records are is because I did a bit of this. Okay,
Nice.
Just saying it. Just saying. Hey,
that's awesome. That's cool.
No, I'm gonna take something from this is that every thought you have probably has a prescribed rule attached to it, just from your past experience. So, for me, that's what I'm taking from this is really.
Right. And they're not all bad and they're not all good. They just take a minute and just recognize that. Recognize the thoughts. See it. Step away. You're not your thoughts. they exist. They're words and pictures around. So just take a minute and then decide. So when the person pulls out in front of you and you just want your brain to blow off, you don't know if they're not rushing off to, an emergency or something like that.
Never do that.
This is so awesome. Like, you know what? Our office still has some bare walls, and I'm totally going to the thrift store and I'm buying some records and I'm putting them on. I seriously am.
I like it.
I want that to remind me.
And then I'm going to get a rope with a nail and I'll look at her and go, Krista.
Oh, we'll just start scratching them. No, whatever.
Say, hey, and she'll be like, okay, I get it.
Right. Well, get a fishing line with a hook and put that up there too, and that reminds you not to get hooked.
You had to bring that up again. No?
Yeah.
So I think I know what your superpower is, but we like to ask all of our guests, if you were to distill, from your point of view, what would you say would be your kind of secret superpower? Or maybe it's not a secret.
I guess the thing that is most important to me, having raised kids myself, and now I've got grandbabies that are coming, and it's just, I can't think of anything that I love more than my kids and their kids and my relationships with my wife and just the whole is I want people to believe that they can accomplish things, that they can reach the dreams and be the people that they only imagine that's possible. So if I had a superpower, and one of the reasons why I like working with young people is I can get you to believe, and I can get you to believe so that you'll do the work. The belief doesn't get you there. It just doesn't. And wanting and hoping, it just never gets you there. But believing enough to do the work, to do the things every day, knowing that this is my path and this is where I'm headed, you do have to have a belief. And so if I can help you believe that you can achieve what you want, if you do the work, then that's what I'm going to call my superpower.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Good.
It's an incredible combo. Really.
Oh my God.
We could go like a million directions.
I'm totally canceling our psychologist. We just got a free session. We just need the next 6 months.
The fishing rod and the record up on the
wall.
Right.
That's right.
So we also like to ask if our guests want to ask us a question, I'm a bit nervous about this.
So we were talking about, you guys have been very successful in the things that you're doing, and you've clearly charted a course that will take you to amazing places, but yet you're willing to sort of disrupt all of that and go at something that's different, something that I'm assuming seems more exciting or more pleasurable or more, laid back. I'm not even sure, but so I would love to understand the psychology of reaching that decision, because if you're on a path that looks successful and technically for all intents and purposes, it was very successful. You guys were killing it, but yet you're willing to sort of pull up stakes and go at something else. That's a very powerful change, and change is scary. How did you guys get to that? You either get to that because something horrible happened and I had to change, or you get to that because I just want something different. I would love to know how you guys got there.
Well, you know what? It's interesting because from us doing these interviews, we have been digging that out that we never really realized. And we realized the other day that it's really aligned, and it's about fulfillment, like your why, like being able to say, we want to help people. So it's not the grind every day of just like, oh, here's another contract, or here's another project, or here's a, whatever it may be. And it would really come, an inspiration for me anyways, came from her in her boutique, in Dear Scarlet Boutique, where she was giving necklaces to moms at the Ronald McDonald House. And some of the testimonials that came, like she had a lady that these necklaces she was giving free shopping sprees to all the moms as like a way to give back to the community. And me as a business guy was like, oh, that's expensive. And, I'm like thinking that way.
But
right?
I was like, no, like
she's like,
I'm
need to help
giving
people.
back. These moms sometimes like go straight from the hospital to our city with very sick kids. They didn't even pack their stuff, right?
Yeah.
Right.
They have nothing.
Women, I mean, like, I'm not going to say we're simple. We are complicated. But if you have a nice new outfit or shirt or something, you just feel good.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So she was really giving that little time respite where they had a bit of retail therapy. And so then she had these necklaces that she found, which were inspirational. And
they said she believed she could, so she did.
Yeah. And so she was giving these necklaces out, and I was like, oh, another thing we're giving away. Anyways, not to take away, like I love going to the Ronald McDonald's house and helping the families, and we've done cooking dinners for everybody. But anyways, you know, not long later, she got a video testimonial from one of the moms whose daughter passed away. And she just said that the necklace had really helped her. It was like the anchor to help her get through it. She could look in the mirror and say, I know this tragedy's happened, but you know, I still have to be a good mom to the other kids. I still have to be a good wife. I still have to. And so we kept getting these types of feedback. And so when we got this, she did a video, sent it to Krista. I had the hair on the back of my head. I was like,
yeah,
whoa, this is like, I do not feel fulfillment like that in what I'm doing, the grind. Right. And I turned to her and I said, honey, and she said, that's what I want to do. That's why
I do what I'm doing.
And so we both didn't realize at that point, but that was the pivot point. It's like, I'm tired of this grind of what I'm doing, not to take away from what we're doing, but it was just like, we want to come up with a platform where her and I are passionate about how, as a family, helping other
making impact.
Yeah.
You know, and that was a pivoting point too, where I also stepped back and went, wait a minute, like, people see you in a certain light, you don't always see that of yourself, right? And for me is when I really realized how I was impacting, you know, lives and strangers without really realizing it. And it was like, you know what, we have, you know, skill sets and whatnot that really can impact other families and lives as well. And why don't we just do it together? You know, like, it just seems like it just makes sense, you know, instead of working on our separate businesses and at the end of the day fighting because we're so frustrated that, you know, all this stuff is happening. Like, money is great, right? But it was like that moment where it was like, I would rather feel that all day long than have that bank account. And just realized that. And it was like, okay, we have to figure this out, you know? And
and I'm realizing it with intent now. It's kind of like you talked about earlier, where if you're cognizant and having a client that, you know, is a small business and helping him, and he's like, my business is increased. Like, you don't realize that this has increased our business 300%. Like, it's incredible. And actually getting that glow. Whereas really in what I've been doing, I just feel like it's like, okay, I got to pay for this building. It's a constant grind, and I'm going, I'm not feeling fulfilled, you know? So, you know, so it's a weird kind of way that this has happened, you know?
Well, you know, you guys are the nicest people. We talked in Boise, and you're so pleasant, and you clearly love life, and you ooze that. And so you're fun to be around. I mean, we talked about positive energy. You guys are positive energy.
No.
So we appreciate, the rest of the world appreciate what you guys bring. So it's awesome that you got there. It's awesome that you know, your journey is not only going to be fulfilling for you, but it's going to be fulfilling for the people around you. But, you know, you're going to enjoy the journey. So God bless you. I think that's awesome.
Oh, thank you so much.
And I think, you know, you were talking about the discomfort. I mean, we're going through that to transition. We're painful.
Emptying, like, we're like,
try to empty the bucket, and I'm bad because I try to build up again, and she's like, no.
I just keep poking holes in it.
So
just water pour. This is good. I don't know what it is, but there's something else for us. I know.
Challenge your old rules. Just challenge your own rules. And a lot of times you'll say, you're right. Why are we doing? Why is that so important to me? It's really not. And then just move on from there. So yeah, you guys are awesome.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Well, go ahead.
All right. So I just wanted to ask if our viewers or listeners need to get a hold of you or want to get in touch with you, how can they do that?
Sure. I'm a sports psychologist. I work with teams and athletes and coaches and parents. You know, it's funny we didn't talk about that specifically, but you mentioned being a parent of an athlete is hard. So I work with all aspects. And so my site is thecompleteplayer.com. It's very hockey centric, but I've worked with athletes from, you know, all different areas. And so if you want to, reach out and see if, we have a conversation and see if it makes sense for what I do, I'd love to hear from you. But thanks for the time on the show, and thanks for being such great people.
Aw,
thank you.
We appreciate it.
All right. Take care.
Okay, bye.
All right.
Bye.
Yeah.